Coming up on this episode, are the Warriors set for a major free agency mistake as more reports emerge on their plans for their final few roster spots? Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. Obviously still traveling here in Disney World, Orlando, but I wanted to get a quick episode out because there's something that's bugging me, that's bothering me a little bit in regard to the Warriors and their free agency plans. Obviously, we think that this Kuminga situation, subsequent signings will go deep into September, but we know that anything could happen at any time. So I wanted to get my thoughts on this out before I get home next week and to Australia, because obviously something may happen between now and then. It's in regard to the final roster spots here, and in particular, a combination of potential free agency options. So Jake Fisher of the Stein Line yesterday had a new report in regard to Golden State and the free agency options that are available to them and what their plans may be, and specifically as well looking at Malcolm Brogdon. So Fisher wrote yesterday for the Stein Line that we won't know if the Warriors emerge with more serious interest in Brogdon until the state of their roster and luxury tax bill becomes clear in the wake of a resolution of Kuminga's fate and the subsequent signings that have been long anticipated to bring Al Horford, DeAnthony Melton, Gary Payton II, second round pick Will Richard into the Bay Area fold. First of all, off the bat, Will Richard, I'd be surprised if he's the 14th guy on the roster. So if he's on the main roster rather than a two-way contract, I'd expect he would be the 15th and final. Now, obviously, the Warriors over the last couple of years have wanted to usually keep that 15th spot open, retain some flexibility, and obviously reduce their payroll a little bit as well. I just doubt that Will Richard would be the 14th guy and they'd leave the 15th spot open. I think if he's going to be on the main roster, it is the 15th. Now, assuming Kuminga comes back or that they bring in some other player via sign and trade, obviously that would mean Horford's the 11th guy on the roster, Melton 12, Payton 13. And if we're saying Richard's going to be the 15th or he's on a two-way and they leave the 15th open, that leaves one more player. One more player in the 14th spot to sign and potentially be on the roster entering next season. Now, they may completely wait and have a training camp battle of sorts. But if you look at the certain options here, obviously Brogdon, we're speaking about Seth Curry. Cody Martin was linked in a report from Fisher last week as well. There's other names floating about, like I know Brett Siegel of Clutch Points has referenced Ben Simmons in the past in relation to the Warriors. So there's plenty of guys left in free agency who have been linked to the Warriors. I'm here to say, though, that if the Warriors prioritize, first of all, GP2 and one of Seth Curry or Cody Martin over Malcolm Brogdon, I think it will be a huge, major mistake in regard to free agency and these signings that could happen. If GP2 and Seth Curry are on this roster over Malcolm Brogdon, I'm going to be pretty pissed. Like, I think that's a really, really big mistake and one that could have a massive impact on the season going forward. To me, it's very, very simple, right? You just got to look at the fit and who could actually make a bigger impact for the Warriors. And you've also got to look at who's just the better player, right? Who's the best player you could possibly sign who also fits what you need on the team? And I think Malcolm Brogdon ticks both of those boxes. Now, I'm going to go into some of the box score numbers here, just the counting stats for these guys. I know there's a lot more to it in terms of impacting, winning, and stuff like that. But it's pretty simple to me that Malcolm Brogdon, yes, has had injury issues over the past couple of years, but he's just a better player than Gary Payton II, and he's a better player than Seth Curry or Cody Martin or whoever really else you want to fit into that 14th roster spot. Right. Malcolm Brogdon over the last 3 years has averaged 14.8 points, 4.3 assists, and 4 rebounds per game in 130 games, averaging 26.4 minutes across those 3 years, shooting 46% from the floor, 41.7% from three-point range, 1.5 turnovers, so a really good assist to turnover ratio. Now, in comparison, Gary Payton II has averaged 5.8 points, 2.9 rebounds, and 1.3 assists on 57.3% shooting and 36.4% from three-point range, averaging 15.4 minutes across 128 games. right? Seth Curry has averaged 7.1 points, 1.6 rebounds, and 1.2 assists in 173 games across the last 3 years, averaging 16.7 minutes, shooting 45.4% from the floor and 41.2% from three-point range. Malcolm Brogdon's just the best player of that trio. He just flat out is. And he also fits the Warriors. Now, I know like those counting stats, they don't take into account Gary Payton's defense, for example. GP2 is a much better defender than Malcolm Brogdon. I get it. Is the difference there, though, as much as the gap is between the offense of those two players? I don't think so. I think that Malcolm Brogdon's a far superior or a much more superior offensive player to Gary Payton II than what GP2 is a defensive player over Malcolm Brogdon, if that makes sense. And Seth Curry, like, I guess it doesn't, like those counting stats, again, they don't take into account the gravity that he provides and just how much defenses have to respect and close out to him on the three-point line as one of the best three-point shooters the league's ever seen from a percentage standpoint, at least. So I get that. And this is just raw points averages, points, rebounds, assists averages, all that kind of stuff. But again, it's not like Malcolm Brogdon is some, bad three-point shooter who defenses aren't going to respect. Again, he's a very, very good three-point shooter on his career. And again, in the last 3 years, 41.7% from three-point range. And so to me, I just don't understand. We've now got into this situation where it seems like a lock almost a guarantee that Gary Payton II is going to be back with the Warriors next season. And that's based on Fisher's reporting here. That's a mistake to me. That's a mistake. And I just, we know, and this is nothing against GP2, he's been a fan favorite. He's a huge part of the 2021-22 championship team. We get that. But at some point, you've got to take a little bit of a risk here and say, we know what GP2 is. We know he fits within the Warriors system. We know he can play a role, right? We get that. But, to me, he's bringing GP2 back is the safe pick. It's why don't you go for an alternative option, someone who could certainly make more of an impact and be far higher up the pecking order in terms of Steve Kerr's rotation? Malcolm Brogdon's averaged 26.4 minutes in the last 3 years. GP2's more than 10 minutes less at 15.4. That just goes to show you, I think that just goes to show you the variance here in terms of the quality of player we're speaking about. And so why are you picking the guy who's averaged 15.4 minutes? And it's well, people say, oh, Malcolm Brogdon's a huge injury risk. Yeah, he is. He's a huge injury risk, right? I think he's played 63 games or something in the last 2 years. I get it. Yes, injury risk. He's also played 2 more games than Gary Payton II over the last 3 years. So it's not like GP2 comes without injury risk. We know what he's been dealing with over the previous few seasons. So I don't get that, particularly now that it seems like GP2 is a lock and that the 14th spot will come down to Brogdon or Seth Curry or Cody Martin or whoever it may be. I just don't see a better option out there than Malcolm Brogdon, right? It's also you've got all these guards, this glut of guards on the roster, and I think that's a whole different conversation about whether or not Golden State should actually be prioritizing a forward option or another big man potentially. I'm actually okay with the center rotation if you're going in with Horford, Post, TJD, and Draymond as your small ball. That's probably enough for me. Maybe I'd like another one on a two-way contract, maybe, although that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case. You're probably going to have Alex Tui as a forward, Taron Armstrong as another point guard, and maybe Jackson Rowe remains on a two-way contract. We'll wait and see what happens there. Maybe I'd like another big man on a two-way. But other than you could make the argument that they probably need another forward, particularly if they do trade Kuminga and don't get another athletic forward type back. Maybe all of a sudden you could argue, well, perhaps they look at re-signing Kevin Knox, which seems like it's very, very, very unlikely at this point. But Monty Poole did mention on a recent episode of Dubs Talk that the Warriors do like Kevin Knox. So you could make the argument, it's well, should the 14th spot actually, instead of going with Brogdon or Curry or another guard, should you go for a forward option of 6'8", 6'9", athletic type like a Kevin Knox who can shoot the three ball? can make that argument. But if we're talking about just the guys that have kind of been linked to the Warriors, which does seem to be this glut of guards, like it's very likely that there's a guard heavy roster going into next season, then Malcolm Brogdon has to be the best of those because there's too many two guards. There's too many guys who Steve Kerr could play at the shooting guard position when you're talking about Pods, Buddy Hield, you're bringing Melton in. If you bring GP2 back, I don't know if you want to call him a guard. He's kind of his own position as like the little big man kind of thing, but still he's 6'2" at the end of the day, and he doesn't handle the ball at all. He doesn't play make for you at all. So there's just so many, like you could slide Moody down to the 2 if you really wanted to. Like we saw him as a primary point of attack defender at times over the latter half of last season. And, he's obviously one of Golden State's best shooters, even if he didn't show that necessarily over the last few weeks of the season, and particularly in the playoffs where he was playing through that injury as well. So there's so many, and then you're talking about Seth Curry, right? And Cody Martin is a bit more of he'd play the 3, I suppose, at the Warriors, but he's still only 6'5". It's not like he's huge necessarily. And so there's all these guys who could play the 2 or the 3, but how many point guards do the Warriors have? Well, they really only have one with Steph, and then Taron Armstrong on a 2-way contract, who I don't think you're looking to play him for any considerable minutes next season, or at least you're not relying on that. Maybe you show something in training camp preseason and can be an out-of-the-box riser for the Warriors, but I don't think you're relying on that in terms of configuring the roster right now. So when Steph inevitably misses games through injury or rest, whatever it may be, if you want to give him an in-game rest and you want to keep his minutes down to like early 30s or something like that, how are you going to do that when there's no actual other point guard option? Now, I think Mike Dunleavy and the Golden State front office are probably looking at this and saying, well, if we have Pods and we have Melton, they're combo guard types who can put the ball on the floor and can play make a little bit. But even then, it's like we saw Pods because they did this last season. In those of you that have been watching this channel and listening to my podcast for a while, you would have remembered last offseason I was getting pretty annoyed with the lack of another point guard option and the amount of faith they were putting into Brandon Podziemski. And I think Pods' form early last season kind of reflected that concern. He was really poor under that increased responsibility. Once they got Jimmy Butler in, obviously they traded for Schroeder initially to try and fix that. They got Jimmy Butler in. Pods was able to settle into more of a supplementary role, and he was really, really good until the playoffs rolled around again when Steph Curry injured his hamstring. And Pods was very, very good in Game 5 against the Timberwolves, I think. But before, leading up to that point, wasn't great, and again struggled with a little bit of increased responsibility in terms of playmaking and shot creation and stuff like that. So, and then Melton, obviously, he's coming off a torn ACL. You don't want to put him, like, I guess you could say, well, he's your de facto backup point guard, but I think that's, again, probably providing too much pressure for a guy who's coming off a long-term injury and played 6 games last season, and before that, only played 38 with the 76ers due to back concerns. Like, he's going to have plenty of games where he's either injured or he's resting, or you just don't want to play him that much because you're trying to ease him back. So why not? If you're going to add if it's going to be another guard, make it a point guard. Make it a guy who you can say reliably, this guy can control the offense when Steph Curry is off the floor, or Steph Curry is resting a second night of a back-to-back, or Steph's got a minor ankle issue or something that's put him out for a week. And whatever it is, like Malcolm Brogdon 2 years ago was the NBA's 6th man of the year. Right. And yes, he struggled with injury since, but his numbers when he has played are still okay, albeit he's been with Portland and Washington, who have been poor teams over recent times, obviously, although Portland are bouncing back now. I don't know. I just think Malcolm Brogdon is just clearly a better player than Gary Payton, Seth Curry, Cody Martin, whoever else you want to name, and he's a better fit. Like, the Warriors actually kind of need a backup point guard. So why is Gary Payton II, by all this reporting, an absolute lock to be on the roster? Like, that's just a safe pick to me. That's like unless the Warriors think there's some, like, they really need GP2 for chemistry reasons, right? Because they've lost Loon. They need his experience in the locker room, his voice in the locker room in terms of GP2, because Loon's no longer there. They need that other guy who's been around for a while. Obviously, that comes into it, but I still don't think that makes up for the clear difference in quality. Like, I just think Malcolm Brogdon's better. And again, you're talking about taking a risk on his body and his health and injury risks, sure, but you're doing that with GP2 anyway. And Malcolm Brogdon, like, we're talking about a minimum contract here. There's not too much in the way of downside, right? Like, if he doesn't work out and he does get injured, like, you could trade him, right? Like, it's a minimum contract, for goodness sake. It's not a guy you're looking to sign for $10 million or even the taxpayer middle level, which you're giving Horford at 5.7. Like, it's a minimum contract. The downside to this is very, very little. And I think the upside with Malcolm Brogdon is quite significant and much more significant than Gary Payton II or even Seth Curry. Again, like, Malcolm Brogdon's a guy who could average 20 to 25 minutes for you. Those other guys, GP2, Seth Curry, Cody Martin, I couldn't see them averaging more than 15, honestly. Like, that's their absolute high end, and Malcolm Brogdon exceeds that quite easily. So it's just one of the things that is bothering me. Like, if the Warriors end up going with GP2 and Seth Curry, or GP2 and Cody, whoever, over Malcolm Brogdon, they had a real opportunity, which it seems like they do, because if Malcolm Brogdon wanted to head somewhere else, like, he could have done it already, surely. And so it seems like Malcolm Brogdon is waiting around to see what happens with this Kuminga situation. And again, if he's there available and the Warriors go in a different direction, I don't understand that at all. I do not get that, because I think Malcolm Brogdon could be really, really good for this team. Anyway, let me know what you guys think if you're on YouTube watching. Let me know in the comments what you make of the Warriors in their final few roster spots. If you agree with me and that Malcolm Brogdon should be a priority, I see him as the third priority behind, obviously, once the Kuminga situation works itself out with whatever, Horford, Melton, they're the top two. You get them done, bang. But to me, if I want a third guy out of these group of free agents, it's Brogdon. Like, Brogdon's the third priority to me, so he should be like the 13th guy. And then you're picking out of like GP2 and Seth Curry. Maybe you could even still have both of them if you're willing to put Richard onto a two-way. But to me, like, they are well behind Brogdon when it comes to this and the free agents to the left for the Warriors to consider. Anyway, I'm going to finish it up there, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. Again, I'll be back in Australia next weekend, so you can be sure to find some more content as we go forward here. And other than that, I'll see you on the next episode. Everyone stay safe, as I will try to while I'm on my travels, and I'll see you soon.